Kia ora whānau, nau mai haramai and welcome to this evening's Centre for Health, Haura Kōrero. Ko Nat Hilterman tōku ingoa, and I'm really looking forward to this kōrero tonight, even with all of our technological challenges. So I hope that our whānau watching at home can figure out where we are and pop on over and have a kōrero with us soon. In a moment, I'll introduce everyone to our panel who will share their insights and experiences regarding the integration of the Maramataka calendar into and give you some insights into sharing it into your everyday lives. If anyone has any specific pātai, please pop it into the chat below or send us a private message and we'll ask our panel any pātai that our whānau have and want to hear from. But before we begin, I'd like to open our Haura Kōrero with a karakia. So Graham, can you open us up with the karakia, please?
Tēnā rā tātou, nei rā te mihi kia koutou, hui mai tēnei pō. I te tuatai kia rātou mā, uhe ki te pō, nei rā te mihi pāpauri kia rātou, mō mātou o piri rākau, ka tangi te ngākau te tō mātou nei whanaunga, Jason, o te whānau Swales, o te whānau Tarau, Rori Tana, nā reira, e takuranga tira e haere atu rā. Kia koutou raro i tēnei kapua pauri, a tangi te ngākau, mō koutou i tēnei wā. Mahotia, mātou te hunga ora, mihi anō ki tēnā kaupapa o te wiki, ko te wiki o te reo Māori tēnei, nā reira kōrero tia te reo Māori, whakanuia te reo Māori, i tēnei tau rima te kau ngā tau, i hipa i te pētihana reo Māori, nā reira ki o mātou nei kuia karaua, i kawe atu i tēnā pētihana ki te parimata, mihi anō ki a rātou. Ko te nuinga, e mimete ki te pō i tēnei wā. Ka tira, hei whakatūwhere i tō tātou nei kaupapa, he mihi anō ki manua ora, kia koutou e mātaki ai nā reira, a me inoi tātou. Tērā maramaka māhute i te pai, te whakatāhuna i te ngaru, te whakaaio i te whenua a kōhiti, a whanake a rākau nui a tohi, tai hoa hoa tia toku ara i te pō, tūturu whakamaua kia teina, haumie, huie, tai kie. Tēnā koutou.
Oh, kia ora, Graham. Thank you for that, kare. Hannah, did you want to set the scene, kare, and just introduce what our kaupapa is i tēnei pō?
Kia ora, thanks Nat, and thanks Graham for that opening. Kia ora whānau, aroha mai for being a bit late. Welcome. So tonight's kōrero is around the Maramataka, different to our Gregorian way of calculating time and days, which is based on a solar system. The Maramataka is a Māori lunar calendar, essentially. It's been integral to whānau for generations. It's the traditional way of marking time. It's been used to help guide planting. It's been used to help guide harvesting, fishing, hunting, the sourcing of food. It's a way of examining the energy levels as they ebb and flow through the days and the nights and the years and the months. It's also been used as a guiding framework for managing our health and the well-being of our whānau as well. And if the moon's strong enough to move the water meters up and down on the daily, then how can it not be affecting our own bodies as well? So really looking forward to the kōrero tonight. Nat will explain, we've got some resources which we'll link to, which will give more explanations around what the Maramataka is in its more basic form. But with these guys on tonight, with their extensive knowledge, I'm really excited to be learning from them around their perspectives and how they've been incorporating the Maramataka into their lives.
Oh, beautiful, Hannah. Beautiful intro to our Maramataka kōrero tonight. So first of all, whānau, we're going to do a bit of a whakawhanaungatanga so you can get to know who our panel are. First, I'd like Mere, my gorgeous Mere, to introduce herself. Kia ora, Mere.
Kia ora, tēnā tātou. Ko Mere Horopāpera tōku ingoa. Keep it short and sweet. Ko Ngāti Rangi Nui, ko Ngai Te Rangi, ko Ngāti Manawa, ko Te Whānau Apa Nui, ko Ngāti Puke, ko Ngā Iwi. And I am a miri practitioner based at the Centre for Health. Tēnā tātou.
Kia ora mere. Kia ora Graham. You're next e hoa.
Hei, tēnā nō koutou. Ai, mihi kawana tēnei uri o Ngāti Rangi Nui o Waitaha Āhei o Ngāti Rangi Wewehi o Ngāti Hinerangi ki a koutou. Nō te piri rākau, wena taku tūranga waiwai. Ko au te ringatohu hauora Māori tūmata nui ki roto i te whatu ora. Nā reira, mihi anō ki a koutou. Kia ora.
Kia ora Graham. Anahira. Kia ora e hoa.
Mauri ora i te whare, ko anahira akuhata tōku ingoa. He uri tēnei no Ngāti Rangi, Ngāti Rangi Nui, Ngāti Haua, Ngāti Pūkenga no hoki. Hi, lovely to be here tonight.
Oh, kia ora whānau. Piriraka in the house. Okay, let's just kick it off. So whānau, what is the Maramataka? We've had a little bit of an introduction from Hannah, but let's kind of unpack what it is. Graham, did you want to kick us off?
This is where we do the pukana eyes and pass to someone else. Look, I thought Hannah's introduction was really helpful. So in my master's research, I had the opportunity to speak to some of our kuia and karaua at that time. And exactly as Hannah said it, the Maramataka, whilst today talked about mainly as a calendar, is really the foundation of how to live a healthy and well life for one's whānau and one's community. So it covers every aspect of life, from when you cut your nails and your hair through to when you might burn your rubbish off, to with fishing, gardening, and on all other elements as well. One of the key kōrero I found really helpful lately is that there'd be multiple maramataka for different kaupapa. And Ricky Solomon says that maramataka probably varied every 20 to 30 kilometres in the day. So maramataka are very much about the mana motuhake of whānau and perhaps hapu. My final point before I hand over to my whanaunga is my research would say that our maramataka came with us on the Wakataki timu. On that waka were atua related to the marama, Hene Korako and her sisters. And so clearly from that, very foundational to our very arrival here in Aotearoa and Tauranga Moana. Kia ora.
Kia ora, Graham. Mere, Anahira, anything else to add? Come on.
Kia ora. Just to add to what Graham talked about, Maramataka for me is about looking at a system of time from a Māori perspective, and that occurs by lining, I suppose, the moon, the stars, the sun with the sea and the earth, and together they give us a time system that moves with the environment. Our ancestors, they were kind of guided and lived in sync with their environment. And they recognized that by following the moon phases, even the stars, it told them when was a good time to work, when was a good time to plant, when was a good time to fish, when was a good time to rest, when was a good time to kind of even to reflect too on the activities that they had been through in the month or performed in the month. So for me, it's about living in sync with your environment.
Sounds a lot about energy too, Kare.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Love it. Mere? Pehea.
Did you guys leave anything for me? No. So other than what you guys have already covered, it's maramataka for us in our whare is our observation of the cycles and patterns in the taiao, and understanding the rhythms of the taiao and how that's mirrored in our own well-being. So you have the cycles and patterns in the taiao, which is ira atua side of things, and then we've got the cycles and patterns in ira tangata. and that covers not just physical, but our emotional, our mental, our spiritual well-being too. And it gives us a sense of connection through the way that we observe and connect with the environment around us, and that everything is connected and that nothing is separate, and the influence that the ira atua has on tātou te ira tangata.
Ooh, so you got something then, Kari. Love it. I love it. Okay, so that's a little bit whānau about what the Maramataka is. So I just wanted to ask our panel, so how did you start your Maramataka journey, your Maramataka hikoi? Anahira, did you want to start?
Yeah, so Maramataka for me is fairly new. So when I say fairly new, it's only been in the last 5 to 6 years that I've been learning and trialing and aligning how I live, or even how I conduct or do certain things around my whare in relation to the Maramataka. So the Maramataka that I follow belong to mine and Mere's grandmother. She comes from the other side of Tauranga Moana, but her Maramataka was developed here in Te Puna, where she lived and spent much of her married life. So it ruled. She used that Maramataka to guide the way in which she planted, the way in which she kaimoana was collected, and even how she felt her energy levels on certain days. So without knowing too much about how that would actually work for me, that's the type of thing that I've been trialing over these past few years. And in doing so, I've kept a little diary and made notes in my diary about what the moon is, what the moon phase is on a particular day, and I'll jot down my observations. I'll go out with a cup of tea and I'll walk around my garden and I'll observe what's happening with my native trees, my fruit trees, what's happening in my garden, what's happening in the sea, because I've got a western sea view where I live, so I can see the moon's set. So yeah, that's what I do. I'm not much of a fisherman, but my husband is. So he's a bit of a hunter-gatherer. He doesn't follow the Maramataka, but I'm always making notes about what he does on certain days. And I've been able to discern that on certain moons, those are the best days for floundering, or those are the best moons for pippies. Or so we've been able to learn a bit about kaimoana in particular in this area. And even marakai, our Fiji gardens and things like that, just from looking at my grandmother's Maramataka and aligning it to what my husband and I are doing on a daily in our own lives. Yeah, so that's my journey. I'm still learning myself.
Oh, love that. And do you kōrero with Mere? Like,
yeah. Yes, Mere and I talk quite a bit, because she lives on the other side of of Paradise. She lives on the other side of Paradise, and then Graham lives up the top of Paradise.
oh,
And so quite often what she sees is the opposite to what I have. So if I've got strong winds on my side, then I know that it's really calm on her side. Same again with her. So she'll message me and she'll say to me, what's happening on your side because it's freezing, or what's happening with your fruit trees and stuff like that. So that's the kind of relationship that we have, Mere and I.
love it. Mere, how did you start your hikoi?
Well, it was just normal with growing up. I didn't actually realize it was Maramataka. And we didn't call it Maramataka because it was just something we knew. Like when Graham mentioned that, like Maramataka too informs like the best time to cut your nails and cut your hair and things like that. So that was just all normal practice for us. We knew on certain moons that if you cut your nails and hair, it'll either grow back faster or grow back slower. And then that was the same with weeding and planting and mowing the lawns. If we would try to only mow our lawns on a weeding day so that it takes 2 weeks to grow back as opposed to just a few days. What other things did we practice? Gathering kaimoana, knowing the tides, so we could go out to get shellfish. When to plant in the garden, even like when to manicure all the plants so that it grows back quickly. And we've been testing that a bit more too in the last few years. But actually delving into it a bit more to get a better understanding of Maramataka. It's only been about maybe 6 years. And only in the last 3 or 4 years have we come across 4 different Maramataka, no, 5 different Maramataka in our tupana's writings. So we're lucky to have all different Maramataka from different our different hapu and tauranga. So we connect to 4 different hapu and tauranga, and they all come from different environments. So we're lucky to have a bit of a broader view of like deep sea, harbour, rivers, swamp. So it sort of gives us a broader understanding of all the different environments, and being able to see that there are all these different Maramataka for, like, we can literally see the next hapu across, and we know that their Maramataka is totally different to ours. So yeah, just in the last few years, it's been 6 years, and it's starting to not test, but evolve to the mātauranga. It's sort of like, oh, well, if we're receiving this mātauranga, what are we doing to evolve into the present, and what health looks like now, and the well-being of the taiao, and how do we give back to that source of knowledge. And yeah.
Graham?
Well, pēnei anahera, relatively recent for me. So my master's was on our Pirirako theology from pre-contact through to the end of the New Zealand Wars. And so I was lucky enough, Uncle Patrick had an enormous, Uncle Patrick Nicholas had an enormous amount of resources. And during the course of my master's research, he said, oh, you might be interested in this. And he had a couple of pages from the journal of Kiriko Te Maunga Pohatu, who's, of course, all of our ancestors. And it was his Maramataka journal from 1884. And then my Burrell whānau here had more of those journals, which they shared with me as well. So that, whilst not entirely specifically relevant to my master's, kind of triggered my interest. But like Mary was saying, kind of just sat there and thought about it for ages. So it's really been the last 3 years or so that I've kind of actively been trying to understand, yes, the moon phases, also the seasonal cycles, the relationship to the whetū. Our journal, what struck me about Kiriko, for example, is clearly all of that stuff was innate. He didn't write it down, but he kind of just wrote down notes because he probably just understood that. So I'm also a bit of a magpie, which I've been really interested in all the Maramataka resources that are coming from around the motu, and some of the understanding of the different names and what they say that their ancestors think they mean. So whilst the names are from his journal, what it means now is probably going to be very different to what it meant 100 and something years ago. That kind of observation, I think, is a key part of any Maramataka now, because it's really only as relevant as the observations you make now and the people around you, the taiao that you live in. Final reflection is, so living a little bit up the hill from my whanaunga here, for example, the westerly winds have all kind of started up. That's actually great for us because we sit under the crest of a gully. So actually, I know it's going to be a far better growing season for our fruit than it has been for a while, and we'll have some great sun on our kumara and potatoes, which will help them. So, I'm really looking forward to the westerly rather than, because actually in our little microclimate, I know from our observations, this is a great time for our whenua. The only thing we had to look after, though, is our animals in that period. So yeah, I just find, yes, there's what our ancestors wrote that I kind of got me into it, but since then it's become this fascinating exploration of my own little part of Pirirako world and our whānau life.
But you're also creating daily emails though too. you want to tell our whānau about that as well?
Yeah, so like Anahira, no great fisher person. And I enjoy the bush, but I'm not regularly out in the bush and or deep sea fishing or anything. So I work in an office, and I like to garden at home, and so that's my maramataka is about those things. And so, as I said, I started doing observations, and in our workplace, so I work in health, and so at the hospital in Tauranga, for our little team there, I started doing, these are my reflections for the day, which at the time were just a couple of lines. And since then, it's kind of grown and developed. The more observations I've made, the more kōrero I've had with people around me. So I think that I started writing daily emails, which is part of my observations of what's going on. And then people said, would you send them to me? I'm like, yep. And so I've been sending that out for a while now. You know, it's this funny thing, which is, so it's, I think it's probably relevant and worth reflecting on in Tauranga Moana, but then there's people all over the motu who are interested, of course, and want to know what's the marama for today, what's its impact going to be. So half of the time I spend, you know, every week I'm sitting out saying, just to remind you, this is a Pirirako and Tauranga Moana maramataka, and so might not be entirely relevant to where you're at, and you should explore your local maramataka, but there's clearly enormous hunger for that. But what I will say is I was driving to Whakatane and stopped in at that great cafe at Matata, and there was a fella there I hadn't seen in a while, and he'd been off with a serious illness. And in that time, he'd started getting the maramataka, and it was really nice. He just said how he, through that experience, had struggled with his mental health. So he actually used the maramataka just to think about whether he was going to get up and do stuff or whether he was going to rest, or he kind of started using it as a way of improving his own mental health. And I thought, well, you know, that was enormously encouraging. So, you know, I mean, I do it for me and my whānau and my close workmates, but it kind of goes a bit further afield now.
Oh, I love that. So let's talk about the maramataka and how it relates to health and well-being. So we kind of touched on a pūraka around mental health. Hannah, did you want to have a little bit of a kōrero around maramataka? Actually, can you tell us about your hikoi with the maramataka? Because you're the go-to, other than Mere, at the centre for the maramataka, aren't you?
Yeah.
I'm not getting out of it.
No, yeah, I am, which, yeah, I still find kind of entertaining, because I'm even more of a newbie than both you guys. So I sort of, obviously we deal with people here, and people come in here with their concerns, their worries, after trauma, seeking answers to various things. And we'd go through phases where, you know, there'd just be, all of a sudden, we'd just be kind of bombarded with people with just some really heavy stuff. And there'd be some weeks where I'd cope with that absolutely fine. And then there'd be other days where I just couldn't deal and didn't want to see anyone. And so I was kind of trying to figure that out. And Miri would say, oh, that's because it's this moon. And so actually, yeah, energy's pretty low at the moment. You're going to see some weird stuff. And so she kept saying that, and I'd sort of then go, okay, maybe if I plan ahead, I can figure out what days are more likely to be these issue-causing days, and what could I do about them. And so here at the centre, and Mere has been the instrumental one in this, and in bringing the maramataka here and kind of, I guess, normalising it in our mahi space. So we now organise our hui around it. My own calendar, I've got days where I've literally blocked out, or afternoons that I've blocked out big chunks of time so that I can go and run in the bush or sit at the beach or do something, go have a miri. And we plan our days, our weeks, our months according to that now, which has been really helpful. And I guess my background, I hadn't really thought about it until kind of recently, when we were sort of like talking more around the maramataka and our why. I come from a background of sport of training, of sticking to a training program that was purely designed around an event. And so I'd have periodized training where I'd be progressively working up towards something, and you'd have hard weeks, easy weeks, really hard days, easy days. So it would always have periods where I was having to give a lot and be physically wrecked, but then it was also allowing my body the opportunity to recover. And over time, that's also started to incorporate fluctuations in hormones and understanding around that. And the Maramataka is essentially, since coming out of that lifestyle, the Maramataka has allowed me a way of almost keeping that kind of periodized training, but applying it to my life. So, I mean, so many people, when we talk about health and wellness, as a society now, we're on the go all the time. There is no time to stop. There's no time to rest. And people go on holiday and they crash and burn and end up sick for their entire holiday, which just seems like such a waste. And it's just because we've been going and going and going and going and never giving ourselves the opportunity to stop and take a moment. And the Maramataka for me has kind of allowed that, kind of like what Graham said around the mental health aspect. It's the acceptance to some days actually go, nah, today's not a good day. I'll go into mahi, I'll do a little bit, but actually then I'm going to go home, or I'm going to go to the beach, or I'm just going to go somewhere in the tile and just be with me. And that has been really helpful for managing stress, but for also making sure that my body's capable of having the energy to help others, because it can be immensely draining sometimes trying to sort everybody else's stuff when actually you're also not dealing with your own. Yeah.
Awesome, Kari. I love how you've been really descriptive about how you've incorporated the Maramataka into your life. Is there any other whakaaro in terms from our panel in terms of how you've incorporated it into your everyday lives? What was the biggest kind of like aha moments? I can start picking on people. Mere, that beautiful smile deserves a korero.
Well, besides saying incorporating into everything, I think one of the big aha moments is probably in my mahi, being a miri practitioner and working with people, and the way that I care for myself as the practitioner to be able to care for others, and just seeing some patterns that come up throughout the different lunar phases, and the way that the tinana responds to the energy of that phase, and the way that it be the way that the different layers of tissue react to a particular lunar phase, or the different bodily fluids react to different lunar phases, even energy levels, mental health is a big one too, spiritual well-being, and the way that I observe the taiao and also observe tātou te tangata. So as soon as someone walks in the door, it's sort of, you do your observations, and there's that whakawhanaungatanga part of that, of the session, of the treatment session, and then just having that open discussion of learning to understand, not just me as the practitioner, but helping others to understand what's happening within their tinana and their different aspects of their well-being, and how do I respond to that as a practitioner. For example, like we might be in the tamatea phase where we've got quite a bit of emotional stuff stirring up, and that when it comes to the miri part, that I have to be aware of what technique I'm going to use, because I don't want to be stirring up even more than what's naturally happening. So sometimes it's more about just calming that and helping anyone to gain an understanding, so that when they leave, I know that the tamatea phase is still going to keep going. So it's that safety aspect around the way that I work with whānau. And that's not about what I think someone needs, but it's about what phase we're in, where that person might be at, or their whānau might be at, and what I can offer to them to help them on their journey. Because understanding the maramataka is not just understanding the phases, the lunar phases as individual lunar phases, that it's a part of a full cycle. And if we see it as the full cycle, then I can also see my practice as it's holistic in the way that I practice, but it's also holistic for any whānau that walk through the door. It's about seeing them as a whole, and not just seeing them as an individual, but as the whānau and their whakapapa that's behind them too. And that it's opened my eyes to the things that I can see and the things that I can't see, and the way that you observe those things. You become a bit more conscious when you sort of slip into that understanding of that awareness of maramataka.
And whānau. Thank you, Mere. Mere's knowledge around all of this is so incredible, and which is why you can never get in to see Mere and her mirimiri, because she's booked up 10 years in advance. Anahira, anything to add, Kari?
In my observations of Maramataka, I recognise that there are certain moons where I'm likely to be more emotional than others, that certain moons where I'm likely to have more energy than I would on other days, and some where I'm going to be quite depleted of energy. And so in my work, I do a lot of support, advice, mentoring and guidance of new and beginning teachers who are quite new into the teaching profession, and some of them actually bring with them some of them actually carry traumas of feeling unsupported, or sometimes they've just not had a very great start in their career. So I have had to create little strategies to help me support them in these particular days, make sure that I'm walking into those conversations with an open mind, ready to listen first and foremost, because sometimes they just need an ear, somebody to talk to, so that they can feel that they can, somebody's listening to them, that whoever they're speaking to is that they trust, and they can confide in them all of their kind of worries. And sometimes all it is just allowing them to talk so that they can get it out on the table and move past it. So within my little kete of, I'm not going to say tricks, but within my little kete, I've got little things that I might take with me to help begin those conversations. Sometimes they're difficult conversations with them, but also some tips and strategies to help them manage some of the anxieties they may be carrying at that particular time. The other thing for me is I need to be able to walk away from those conversations as well and free myself of the burden sometimes that they might be sharing with me. So for me, I might come home and spend some time by myself, just reflecting on what we've done. I might make some notes about some of the energies or the feelings that are happening at that particular time. I might be able to think of some other strategies to help support those people, but also myself, allowing myself to release those so that I can move on with the next part of my mahi. Yeah.
Beautiful, Anahira. Graham?
Yeah, so I mean, that reminds me that I guess one of the things that Maramataka has emphasised for me is the importance of whakanoa. So there are times to cleanse and to set things free. So I think I already knew that in terms of our our kawa and tikanga at home at the marae, but then seeing that as part of cycles that you experience. And I'd also, like, could not tautoko enough meres kōrero around, it's about cycles. So there are monthly cycles and then there are seasonal cycles. So I guess one of the aha moments for me is I could see that winter pattern of depression and anxiety in my life. And so recognizing that I need to do life a different way during those periods, because those cycles aren't going to change. So I actually have to change the way I respond to those cycles. Then I say, I'm so like Hannah, I've integrated this into my work diary. Most of my colleagues don't necessarily respect that all that well, but you know, there are particular cycles during the month where I like you, I block out whole days. I'm like, no, I just not interested in your stuff in that day, and that is enormously helpful, but it's really hard to do. But I think it's got to be a change in how we work, moving from a 5-day week to the cycles in terms of when we can put our best foot forward in terms of what we're trying to achieve. And the only other thing I'd say, and in terms of health, one of the big aha moments for me is there's been a little bit of research done around the country in different emergency departments in relation to the Maramataka. Ricky Solomon, I think, has led a couple of those. And, you know, looking at suicidal ideation and suicide attempts in ED departments, and showing that, you know, over a period of 3 to 5 years, if you look at the data, they line up really well with the cycles around Rākau Nui and around Tamatea, around Whiro and different emergency departments. So how we organise our systems, to, for example, in health, how we resource who we have on the floor at that time, all of that stuff. You know, you would do well to listen to what's happening in the taiao, that's happening in the community, and rather than just planning as though it's always going to be the same. So for me, that was seeing the Maramataka's utility on a far bigger scale has been really interesting as well.
And we're really lucky. I mean, we live in, like I think you described it before, Graham, in microclimates, right? I live in Te Puna as well. Oh, Hannah, where do you live?
Whangarei, pretty much just the other side of the river.
But and so we've got beautiful access to our whenua, but what about our whānau in the cities? Like, how does that differ if there's not that same access to the whenua, or, you know, everyone's living in an apartment, or, you know, do we want to have a bit of a kōrero about that? Pēhea tō whakaaro. I'm going to pick someone.
Well, I'll try it at least, because, like, for me, I mean, particularly at the moment, mahi is really busy. I'm living between literally 2 towns, so I'm not actually getting the time that I would have done previously to spend out in the taiao, to get outside. When I get home, it's dark. When I leave home, it's dark. So for me, it's been more so recently, like literally within the last week, acknowledging what the days are, knowing what phase we're actually currently in, literally at the moment. And so making sure I'm taking the time during the day and actually driving to the beach. I'm driving to places where I know I can have that moment, I can ground, I can just breathe in the salty, fresh air. So I actually think, regardless of where you are, sometimes what you need isn't necessarily on your doorstep. Sometimes actually going out and exploring a little bit further. We're so fortunate in Tauranga Moana to have so many beautiful places that we can go. And I think it's actually really important to explore those different areas, because you get a different perspective. You get to see different areas of the moana. You get to smell different things as well. You can go in the bush, you can be by the ocean, and I think it's actually really important for all of us to do that, and actually get out of your home environment sometimes too, because you can get a little stuck in your ways sometimes being at home. Yeah, not to say that you also regardless of where you live. I mean, even living in the middle of a city, there are some really beautiful spots. There's always somewhere that you can walk to within a few minutes and look up, because the sky is beautiful. There's going to be trees around you. Yeah, you can always find those spots regardless of where you are.
And happy to jump in there. Look, you should have my wife really on here to talk about the experience at the Te Wharekura o Mauao, because they're, you know, trying to integrate the Maramataka into their curriculum, but also into the way that they look after their tauira and our whānau there. You know, heaps of our whānau live in quite desperate situations. So, you know, they struggle to access many of the things that we're talking about, struggle to even conceive of taking the time to access that. So, but the Maramataka and the Wharekura environment is a good example of how we plan, how we work with our community and work with people can have an enormous impact on them. So thinking about the pressure we're putting people under in different cycles, you know, for example, in education or in health or whatever, I think is really important. So I think you can use the Maramataka to look after the well-being of the community without always putting the responsibility on those parts of the community to have to add another thing to their life. In saying that, I also really agree with Hannah. I think having lived in Maryvale for 11 years, there's some beautiful places in Maryvale, and I think about, you know, it'd be quite conceivable to do all of the strategies we're talking about in our community when we live there. I think the challenge is that, you know, we need to make sure our council and our community invests in that kind of infrastructure, you know, parks and walks and, you know, community events, so people can add this stuff into this kind of holistic view of what well-being is.
Love that. Any other whakaaro? Kyle?
Maybe bear with me with trying to find the words of what I'm trying to say. But like, say, if we're looking at a city, I think one of the examples I can give is the way that we observe the taiao, and that cities built on land, sometimes when we can go for a walk and observe the contours of the land and the animals that are on that land and the wind that comes across that land, and whether or not there's water or if there's mist or fog, that there are different ways that the taiao will tell us these are the places we can and can't go, or shouldn't go at different times of the month, within different lunar phases. I think too, it's important for us, if there has been some sort of human intervention and there's a big city on a place that city didn't used to be there, that it's very important for us to trust in our kōrero tuku iho. That land or that place will have stories. There will be waiata and things like that. And when we do have, sometimes it's a privilege these days to hear those kōrero, or to learn those waiata, or to spend time with tangata whenua, that it's really important that we learn to observe different areas, different rohe, through a Māori lens or through our kōrero tuku iho, because it's the kurahuna within those kōrero that help us to connect to that place. Because whilst there are some amazing green spaces and there are places along the waterfront and that are now being developed for people to have that space outside, it's also very important to understand the history of that place. And it's through that we can gain that connection, and that the spiritual connection to gain spiritual well-being. I'll leave it at that, I think.
Bye, lovely.
Can I just add to what Mary is saying? In theology, talk about thin places, and that's what that landscape is. That's where your tupuna are. That's where the wairuatanga is. They're thin places, and I love that. That there's a geography that's our tupuna geography, and so following that it's probably good for us.
Love it. Love it. What is the best way to start using the maramataka with your whānau at home? Anahira?
I would probably say if you have access to a whānau maramataka or a local maramataka, then awesome. That's a great place to start. But if you don't have a maramataka, maybe ask around your local community to see if anybody in your community has one that they're willing to share. Because I know many maramataka are whānau specific. They're owned by whānau or they're owned by hapu. So yeah, first and foremost, I'd say ask around your local community, see if there's anyone willing to share their maramataka with you. If not, then start doing some daily observations of what's happening in your environment and start recording them. So even things like when the moon rises and when the sun sets, or when the sun rises and the moon sets, observing what's the time difference between those. What do you notice in your environment? The wildlife, the birds, the trees, the flowers in your gardens, the activity in the gardens. It could be even the bees, things like that. And then the third one I would say is also pay attention to how people are feeling, how you're feeling yourself, or some of the energy levels too within your own whare, and make a record of those, because what you'll start seeing is over time you'll start seeing a pattern of these behaviors, of these you'll start seeing recurrence of certain things at certain times of a month. Yeah, so those would be my tips if you're looking to start out on a maramataka journey.
Goodbye. And whānau, we were talking just before we came on board that Tuhi Stationery have like an awesome diary, and we'll pop it in the chat later, and it you'll be able to record if you wanted to get into the habit of a journal and following that lunar cycle. They've got some beautiful resources there. We'll pop it into the chat later. Mere? How would you incorporate the maramataka easily to start with your whānau?
One, everything that Anahira just said.
Aye.
But if, like I always tell people, if you're a green thumb, observe your garden. If you're a fisherman, observe what's going on in the taiao, like even right down to what you're catching, how you're processing it, and all those sorts of things. I think too the art is in the consistency, your consistency to observe, because then you can find the pattern, whether you write it down or you've got good memory or what have you. It's the consistency and in your observations. Anything else? Kea Graham pia e tahi tips anō.
Look, tautoko au ngā kōrero. I think the only thing I'd want to add is it's not a religion, not a ritual. You don't have to get it right. So I think people give up on these things because they think, oh, I made a mistake, or that doesn't work, and it's like it's an observational science really. So I think that just kind of hang in there, and I'm always learning all the time, and so what I thought was right 3 years ago, I now know I was like, oh, that was a bit off, but that's all right. It's just like a learning thing, eh? So I think be open to learning. And the reason I laughed earlier was one of the funny things my kids do now is you know, when things aren't going right, they go, oh, it's called tamatea, Tina. It's tamatea's problem. So I don't know if that's the whānau using it, but they blame the marama for a whole variety of things now. So there we go.
Oh, kapa, I love that. Hannah, how do you talk about the maramataka with your whānau?
I make comments, whether they usually just nod and probably carry on. I certainly blame the Maramataka, probably like Graham, I blame the Maramataka for a lot, and so that's probably what vocally comes out in front of my whānau. And I think, I'm trying to think of the right words, it's kind of along with what Graham was just saying, but I think for me the Maramataka's just allowed this kind of like this additional level of understanding and of acceptance of being okay, of not being okay, but also allowing myself to, I guess, be a part of this thing that is so much bigger than just me. It helps build that connection, particularly for me with the tile. I mean, I've always had this huge connection with the whenua, with getting outside, with being immersed in our beautiful bush. That for me is my happy place. And so the Maramataka just helps support that entire process and drives more purpose behind why that is so important for me. So I think it's keep it simple. Like I sit down and I'll plan till the next new moon what's happening, and that's how I'll then plan my days as well. And yeah, I've got Mere on tap, which might be cheating some days when I forget where we're at, or I've got to mahi before I've been able to see the moon set, so I don't know what day it is. So I just text Mere, but keep it simple. And yeah, it's the observation aspect, because when you can sit back and actually observe what's going on, then you're able to be so much more present. Your whole body is calmer. You can actually be more prepared to then deal with whatever is going to come at you. So I think from a health aspect, just having that connection with the fact that there's something so much bigger going on, taking the time to pause and observe it, just allows us the opportunity to slow down and just have a moment of peace and get out of the rat race. Yeah.
Oh, I love that. And so because we, the Centre for Health is all about health and well-being, and we've been having a kōrero around the moon phases, can we have a little bit of a kōrero quickly around what moon phases are best for health and well-being? I know we could go forever, but I also know that there's some particular high energy, low energy, but when we're taking care of ourselves, we just have a little bit of a kōrero around those phases and energy levels. Here. Graham, kick us off, buddy. Oh, Anahira, yes. I thought one of these.
Yeah, no, I was just going to say this moon phase was not a particularly good one for me today.
Which one was it?
Today, Aiki Taku Maramataka, according to my Maramataka, it's Mutu Whenua today, which is the last lunar moon before the new moon. Meres might be slightly different, Graham's might be slightly different. But anyway, it was playing tricks on me today, and I lost something, and 20 minutes before the Zoom was to start, I found it, and I was clapping and I was jumping up and down. But yeah, there was a bit of a tense period there where I was blaming the marama, and I shouldn't have done that. But what it made me do, and actually Mere reminded me, just sit down and breathe. So I did. I sat down and I took a couple of deep breaths, and lo and behold, right in front of me on my coffee table was what I was looking for. I won't tell you what that was, but yeah, there are certain moons where sometimes the obvious is right in front of you, but you can't see it. And sometimes you just need to sit down and take a breath and slow down. Sometimes it's just a reminder to slow down. closing that. The kore moon phases for me, I didn't even have to look at my maramataka and know that I'm already in the kore moon phase. It's one of my lowest energy phases for me. For me, it's not a good time to go into any kind of hui or conversation. That's the time when I go and have a wānanga with my hobbies. And quite often it's not with people. I will go and sit with whatever takes me back to my place of Zen. My high energy moon phases are usually around the Rākau Nui moon phases, but it also means that I need to be cognizant that I don't actually run away, I don't get pulled in all kinds of directions with things that might be going off in my head, because my head comes up with lots of ideas and things like that, and I can get distracted quite easily. So yeah, so there are high energy moon phases for me, there are really low energy moon phases, and there are some where I need to, the moon phases early in the month, which will come after whiro. The phase is period in which I plan. I do a lot of planning ahead and set my goals and my intentions for the month. The end of the month is also when I reflect on all of those goals that I had set as well at the beginning of the month, and I look back and I think, what did I set out to do this month, and did I achieve it? And if not, why not? What went wrong, and what am I going to do about it the next month? So yeah, that's me and my maramataka energy and all of that.
Great planning, love that. I've got a pato here from one of our whānau. Mihi ko ana ki a koutou. What are some eating habits that can guide us? And pihia ngā whakaritenga hei hiki te taumahatanga mamai o te ruahinetanga, perimenopause and menopause. Any whakaaro?
I could touch on it a little bit. I guess obviously pre-menopause, maramataka, the more you observe it, the more you're aware of it. For us women, your hormone phases will align with it as well, because the maramataka can help shape your daily routines, your habits, as well as being aware of actually your own energy levels. And so your hormone phases will actually start to align more closely with the maramataka. And I guess as a part of that, it's being aware of the fact that when we're in a high hormone phase, which sometimes can coincide with a fairly low energy phase in the maramataka, all we want to do is binge on the deep fried kai and the sugary stuff and the high carbs and the easy energy things. And I guess part of the maramataka is being aware of what's going on in terms of those energy levels. The more aware you also are of your own hormone phase too, can help just with that knowledge of becoming aware of actually what does my body need right at the moment, and hopefully guide you to make those decisions that are going to support it in a slightly more fulfilling and healthy way. Unfortunately, perimenopause can be a little bit more chaotic and unfortunately more sporadic, but equally by utilizing the maramataka to help guide your own habits, and when you are applying yourself more physically, allowing yourself to recover, you can in some circumstances or in some ways help guide your own hormone levels as well. But again, it's that awareness, it's the understanding of what's going on, it's the understanding of your hormones, it's the understanding of the energy at play around us. The more you're aware of that, the more you can see it and understand what's going on, you can help make the decisions that are actually going to support your body, rather than succumbing to whatever you feel like, which some days is okay. But when that becomes every other day, that's not so okay to play. Yeah.
Love it, Hannah. Any other whakaaro on that? What you got, Mary?
Maybe just considering going back to maramataka and cycles, because ikura and the marama and wahine, there's a big connection between the marama and wahine. And if we look at the cycle of the moon, you've got the beginning at whiro where you can't even see, when you can't even see the marama, and then she'll wax. She'll get to the high phase, and then she'll wane. Kei te pera hoki mātou, tātou tērā wahine, that our life cycle is that we start off at the new moon, and then we build to, for some wahine, we get to the point where we can have children, and we're peaking at our hormones and things like that, and then it starts to wane, and you go into a ruahine phase. So if you learn the different energies of the different phases within the waxing and the waning, sometimes there are some kurahuna there about, I can't speak for Tāne, but for wahine, sometimes there are a few kurahuna in there that tell us the natural cycle of life, pretty much. And the way that it's not just hormones, but it's everything else, whether it be our behaviors that come with our hormones, our energy levels, and that it's, if we isolate just the hormones, then we sort of don't get to see the bigger picture of everything else, whether it be the taiao around us, whether it be our whakapapa. For some cases, there might be a bit of trauma there, but it's learning to not just isolate it to just hormones, that each individual, if we can see ourselves as a whole, that there's all these different things too that influence that. But in regards to hormones, there's, or the cycle, the ikura cycle, that you start off at the new, you get to the high hormones throughout your whole life, not just in the one lunar phase, and then it starts to wane and you go into the ruahine phase.
Choice. All right, whānau. Last partai, and we've gone a little bit over, but we started later, so I hope everyone at home has got these beautiful little gems. But what I wanted to, and has enjoyed listening to our amazing panel, but what I wanted to kind of leave everyone on, if I could ask our panel, what is one key piece of information you would like to leave with whānau before we close our kōrero? Graham, can we start with you, Kare? What's the one key piece of information about the Maramataka you would like to leave with whānau?
Hi, and this is just to acknowledge Dr. Rangi Mātāmua instead of this kōrero. The Maramataka is part of the decolonisation of our sense of time and our sense of who we are. The solar calendar is from a people who base their life around the sun and its rhythms and its movements, and we're actually a lunar people. Our ancestors were lunar people. Our wānanga were held at night. Our kaupapa, where we set our waka and their travel at night. So that connection with who we are as, he kākona ruia mai rangiatia, is part of our decolonisation. So the Maramataka is worth exploring because decolonisation is worth pursuing.
Hannah?
Many things. Just step outside and take a moment, look around, and in the evenings before bed, best time to do it. Help you declutter your mind from the day. Take a moment to be present, take a deep breath in, and actually look up. It's amazing what that can do for your own body and for your own mind, but you can also therefore start to reflect and observe, become aware, become present, and become a part of a world that is so much bigger than just your day-to-day activities. And I think that's what supports all of us, regardless of where you're from, regardless of where you're at or what you're doing. It's the understanding that we are all human on this earth, hopefully trying to protect and support our taiao for generations to come. So let's get present in it and pay it some respect.
Anahira?
If you're starting out on this journey, the Maramataka does not align to the Gregorian calendar. So don't think that each moon is going to follow a sequence, you know, it's going to be, today is going to be this moon and tomorrow will be that moon. Because sometimes the moons, you can observe 2 moons in one day. So for example, Ormutu was still in the sky this morning. That set, and then Mutawhenua rose. So we experienced 2 moons in the same day. And tomorrow is going to be the same as well. There'll be 2 lunar phases in one day. So if you're starting out, you have to start looking at your time system from a completely different lens. So that's my little kupu whakamutunga. Kia ora.
Kia ora, Anahira. Mere?
Well, let's talk all my ones now. I think be okay to not always be right. Not in the sense of just do whatever you want, but maybe the best way to explain it is mā tā mua te taiao, mā tā muri te tangata. That the knowledge is living and it's around us, and then it's how we use that, the knowledge that we take from our observations, that we don't determine what's happening in the taiao. So be okay with that, and that you're not always right. That's how I mean that. It's a better way of saying it anyway. But yeah, mā tā mua te taiao, mā tā muri te tangata, and that it's okay to just sit in the taiao and observe, and it's not always about seeing everything, but the way that what we're feeling, what we're smelling, it's all those different things, even the different kai that we taste throughout the year. Like, these are all observations in the way that we spark our memory, and that when we create those moments with different ways of remembering, and not just trying to remember in our minds, that we have these experiences in the taiao, that's where a lot of the data is stored, for me at least, is remembering through experience. And I think when it comes to trying to remember it in our minds all the time, that it sort of starts to sway us and we're overthinking things. And that the tile is going to carry on anyway, regardless of what we're thinking. So if we can create those memories through experience in the tile that we're in, it has a different way of recording data. And that is passed down, those experiences can be passed down through whakapapa, through whakawhanaungatanga, and our ability to create space where we share those too. So ia, koe ra taku whakamutunga mo tēnei pō.
Oh, kia ora mere. And kia ora to ngā mihi nui kia koutou katoa for all of your beautiful insights into the Maramataka I tēnei pō. So whānau watching at home, I hope you've gotten some beautiful insights. And I'm going to ask Graham to close us down with a kōrero, ihoa. But pō mari e whānau, thank you for logging in and listening to our kōrero. And we'll see you back next month for our hauora kōrero. Graham, can you close us down, please?
Haira, nei rā te mihi atu ki a koe net. Me whakahaere I tēnei pō, I tēnei kaupapa kōrero, nā reira, e te tuahine, tēnā koe. Ka tai ki a koutou, no ngā whaia tupuna tēnei kōrero o hina, o ngā marama, nā reira, ki a koutou kaue mai ngā kōrero o ngā mārei kura o mātai mātua tupuna, mihi anō ki a koe. Wako tuahine, nā reira, hei whakakapi. Me inoi tātou, tū wano I karaki ana tana karakia, ka pai tūtarangi āniwaniwa, ka pai tūtarangi a whiowhio, ka pai ko kingi tūheitia ki tōna haurewa tapu, ka pai rire hau. Pai mārire.
Kia ora whānau. Po Mārie.